I found out my family planned to embarrass me at Thanksgiving and then throw me out. So on November 28th, when Mom called asking where I was, I told her to check with the hungry guests and ask why there's no food. I used to pour my heart and soul into Thanksgiving, making sure every detail was perfect for my family. But last year, they took all that love, all that effort, and twisted it into a public humiliation so cruel, it made my blood run cold. See, I'm Edward, 29, and for as long as I can remember, Thanksgiving was my holiday. I lived for that chaotic energy, the smell of turkey filling my house, even the silly arguments about cranberry sauce versus jelly. I loved it so much that I was always the host. I'd be up at 5 a.m., prepping the bird, spending days cleaning, triple-checking every recipe until my home felt warm and utterly perfect. But last year, everything changed. It started subtly, with a weird group text from my mom. She sent the usual Thanksgiving dinner at Edward's at 5 p.m., but this time she added, "Everyone bring your appetite. This year will be special." I brushed it off. Maybe a new dessert? But then my cousin Lauren replied, "Oh, I can't wait. This is going to be juicy." And my sister Claire just sent a laughing emoji. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Over the next few days, the comments kept coming. Claire called, asking if I was ready for a little surprise. My uncle texted a gif of a turkey running away, captioned, "Better not skip dinner." Even my dad, who usually just eats and leaves, warned me not to get too sensitive this year. Sensitive about what? I told myself I was overthinking it, but the feeling that something was deeply off wouldn't go away. I just tried to focus on the food, convinced that if the meal was flawless, nothing could ruin the day. I marinated the turkey overnight, tried a new stuffing, even baked 2 pies because someone complained last year. Everything had to be perfect. Then, the day before Thanksgiving, I overheard something that truly made my blood run cold. I'd stopped by my parents' house to drop off some extra folding chairs. They weren't home, but my stepmom, Carol, was, with her phone on speaker. She was talking to Claire, and they didn't realize I'd walked in. "Oh, it's going to be perfect," Carol said, a nasty sweetness in her voice. "Everyone will be there, and he won't even see it coming. He needs to be humbled a little." Claire actually laughed. "Exactly. He thinks he's better than everyone with his house and his job and his perfect Thanksgiving. This will put him in his place. And after we say it, we're finally kicking him out of the family chat." I froze. In the hallway, gripping those chairs so hard my knuckles turned white. My ears burned with a sudden, searing heat. They were planning something at my house, in front of the whole family, and they were planning to humiliate me. I backed away quietly before they could spot me, set the chairs in the garage, and left without a single word. My heart pounded the whole drive home, a drum solo of betrayal. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every possible scenario played out in my head. Were they going to drag up old secrets? Criticize my life? Was it about not bringing a date? Carol's words echoed. He needs to be humbled. The next morning, I was supposed to start cooking at dawn. Instead, I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the raw turkey. My phone buzzed with family messages, confirming their attendance and what they were bringing. For the first time ever, I felt no excitement, only dread. I felt like I was walking into a trap, and that's when I made a decision that changed everything. I wish I could say I just shook it off and went back to basting turkeys. But no, I sat there for a long time, the house eerily quiet. My kitchen, usually a hive of happy activity, felt still. The perfectly lined up spices, the polished utensils, they all felt like props for someone else's play. Around 8 a.m., my mom called, her voice overly cheerful. "Morning, sweetheart. Got the turkey in the oven yet?" I hesitated. "Not yet, still prepping." "Well, don't be late this year," she said quickly, almost nervously. "We want to get started right on time. Everyone's very excited about this year's dinner, right?" Her excited sounded like a threat. By noon, I forced myself to start some prep. I cleaned the turkey, chopped vegetables, made a timeline. But something was different. Usually, I'd have classic rock blasting. This time, I cooked in silence. Every clink of a knife, every oven timer felt deafeningly loud. Then Claire called. "Hey, chef," she sang, using her mocking tone. "Hope you're ready for tonight. We have a special announcement planned." "An announcement?" I asked, my voice careful. "Oh, yeah," she purred, clearly grinning. "But don't worry, you'll get to be front and center for it." My silence must have signaled discomfort because she added, "Hey, Don't get all serious. It's just family fun. You take things way too personally. I forced a laugh. Right, family fun. But when I hung up, staring at my reflection in the microwave door, my stomach twisted again. Family fun. My family's fun had always been a little sharp. Growing up, I was the responsible one, the good grades kid, the one who cleaned up. That made me the default punchline. Teased for being uptight, for trying too hard. I'd learned to laugh it off, but how many years can you be the family punching bag before you start to wonder if maybe you are too much? By 3 p.m., my kitchen was filled with the rich smells of Thanksgiving, but I couldn't enjoy it. My phone kept lighting up with group chat messages. My aunt sent a wine bottle picture. We're bringing the good stuff. We'll all need it tonight, with a laughing emoji. My cousin wrote, can't wait for the show. The show. That word made my chest tighten. Then, as if the universe wanted to drive the point home, my dad called. He never calls me on his own. My stomach sank. Hey, Dad, I said cautiously. Edward, he said, his tone almost businesslike. I just wanted to remind you tonight's important. Don't make a scene. A scene? My voice cracked slightly. Why would I make a scene? He sighed. Just keep your cool. You tend to get defensive, and we don't want any drama this year. I bit back 100 responses. Got it. No drama. But the call left me rattled. Why warn me not to get defensive unless they knew I'd have a reason to be? By late afternoon, my house looked perfect. Candles on the mantel, the good china laid out, food warm in the oven. But I couldn't shake the feeling it was a stage. And I, unwillingly, was the main act. The first to arrive was Carol, my stepmom. She walked in with a smug smile, didn't even say hello, and went straight to the kitchen. She said, lifting a lid. Smells good. At least you got this part right. This part? I asked, knife in hand. Oh, you know what I mean, she said, waving a hand, already taking pictures of the table. The food. You always do that. Well, it's the rest of it that we'll see about. I stood frozen for a moment, then forced out. Glad you approve. The next arrivals were similar. Cousins whispering, snickering. My aunt winking. Oh, tonight's going to be memorable. My mom arrived last, flushed and excited. Everything ready? She asked. Yeah, I said flatly. Perfect, she beamed. Let's eat. Then we can get to the good part. The good part. My pulse quickened. Everyone sat down. I took my usual seat at the end of the table, carving knife in hand. Usually, this was my favorite moment. Everyone. Quieting, heads bowed for grace, waiting for me to slice the turkey. This time, I could barely breathe. Mom cleared her throat dramatically. Before we dig in, she said, I just want to say how proud I am that we're all here together, and I think tonight will bring us even closer as a family. Everyone nodded and smiled. Everyone except me. Then she looked straight at me. Edward, why don't you start carving? We don't want to keep everyone waiting. I stood, knife poised. But something in her tone, the way everyone's eyes were on me, made me pause. And that's when I heard Claire mutter, just loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh, this is going to be so good. I swear the room shrank. Heat crawled up my neck. My hand tightened around the carving knife until my knuckles turned white. I forced myself to smile, the same fake smile I'd worn for years, the one that said, I can take a joke. But this time, something deep inside me knew. This wasn't going to be just a joke. I sliced the first piece of turkey. As I laid it on the platter, I caught my mom exchanging a quick look with Carol. A split-second nod I would have missed if I hadn't been watching. Dinner started as usual. Dishes passed, wine poured, compliments for the food. For a brief moment, I almost believed I'd imagined it all. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe this year would be like every other. But then my mom cleared her throat again. So, she said, setting down her fork and smiling broadly. Before we get too full and sleepy, we have a little surprise. The table quieted. Carol clasped her hands together. Yes, we've been waiting all week for this. Claire leaned back, smirking. Oh, this is going to be fun. I put my fork down slowly, my appetite gone. My mom looked directly at me. Edward, you've been doing such a good job hosting Thanksgiving every year, keeping everything so perfect. But we all thought it was time to, well, be honest about a few things. A cold, prickly feeling spread through my chest. Honest about what? I asked carefully. About how you've been acting, she said, her tone deceptively warm. You're always so serious, so controlling about everything. You have to have everything just so. The napkins folded a certain way, the turkey carved a certain way, everyone's sitting exactly where you want them. And we've all been talking. Talking. My voice tightened. Yes, she said, nodding toward Claire. In fact, your sister has been keeping a little list. Claire grinned and pulled out her phone. Oh yeah? We thought it would be fun to share all the times you've gone overboard, to lighten the mood. My stomach dropped. Before I could respond, Claire started reading. Let's see. She scrolled dramatically. Last year, Edward made us all wait 40 minutes before eating because the rolls weren't golden brown enough. Oh, and the year before that, he got mad that Uncle Tom brought store-bought cranberry sauce and not homemade. Oh, and remember when he made us all go around the table and say what we were thankful for twice because he said the first round didn't sound heartfelt enough. Laughter rippled around the table. I sat frozen, gripping my chair. My fingers ached. And who could forget? Claire continued, grinning. The time Edward sent out a 7-page PDF with Thanksgiving guidelines, with diagrams of the table setting. The table erupted. Real loud laughter. My aunt wiped tears from her eyes. My uncle, between chuckles, asked, "You really did that?" My mom beamed, pleased. "See, we're all just having fun, honey." My ears burned. My chest felt like someone was sitting on it. Claire wasn't done. "And this year," she said dramatically, "we thought we'd do something special to help you loosen up a little." Before I could ask what she meant, 2 of my cousins jumped up and returned with a huge cardboard box. They set it in front of me. "Go ahead," Claire urged. "Open it." I hesitated, but everyone was staring. I lifted the lid. Inside was a cheap paper crown, a plastic scepter, and a sash that said, "Thanksgiving King." For a second, I just stared. Then Carol clapped. "Put it on," my mom urged, smiling like this was the sweetest thing in the world. "It's just a little joke." I sat there, paralyzed. But before I could react, Claire grabbed the crown and shoved it onto my head. A cousin draped the sash across my chest. Someone snapped a picture. Someone else started chanting, "Speech! Speech!" I wanted to sink through the floor. They were laughing. All of them. Not with me. At me. "This is what you wanted, right?" Claire mocked. "You're the king of Thanksgiving. Everything has to be your way. So we figured we'd make it official." The room roared again. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly. The laughter died down, just enough for them to see the look on my face. "Edward," my mom said cautiously. I looked around the table. At my mom's expectant smile, Claire's smirk, Carol's raised eyebrows, the cousins barely containing their giggles. For a split second, I thought about screaming, about telling them how cruel they were, how much work I put into this day, how this house, this table, this meal were the only reasons they even had a Thanksgiving to gather around. But instead, I just stood there in silence. And that silence was louder than anything I could have said. My dad cleared his throat. "Sit down, son. We're just joking around." But I didn't sit. I took off the crown slowly, set it gently on the table, and said, very quietly, "You planned this." No one answered. "You all planned this." I repeated, louder this time. Still silence. That silence told me everything. I turned, walked into the kitchen, and just stood there, gripping the counter, staring at the turkey knife still on the cutting board. My hands were shaking. Not with fear, but with something else. Something dangerously close to resolve. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, the laughter started back up in the dining room. Quieter now, more awkward, but still there. They just moved on like nothing had happened. Like my humiliation was just another part of the entertainment. I leaned against the counter and let out a slow breath. My heart still pounded, palms damp. My house felt different now, like I was a guest in it. No, not even a guest. A prop. Eventually, my mom poked her head into the kitchen. "Edward," she said gently, "come back to the table. Don't ruin dinner." Her words hit me like a slap. Don't ruin dinner? Like I was the one ruining it. Like I hadn't just been turned into the family clown in my own home. "I'm not hungry," I said without looking at her. There was a pause. "Well," she said, her tone sharpening, "at least bring out the pie before it gets cold." Then she was gone. I stood there for another minute, then walked upstairs, away from the noise, the food smells, everything. I shut myself in my room and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing the stupid sash. I tore it off and threw it into the corner. For the first time in years, I didn't feel proud of this house. Normally, when my family gathered, I felt a swell of pride seeing them around my table, under my lights, eating my meal. But tonight, I felt empty. I heard faint bits of conversation and laughter floating up, At one point, Claire's voice rang out. Guess King Edward needed a royal nap, followed by more laughter. I stared at the ceiling, willing myself not to cry. I don't cry easily, but something about this, the deliberate nature of it, how they'd planned it together, felt like a deep betrayal. Not a spur-of-the-moment joke, but something they'd looked forward to, something they'd laughed about behind my back for days. And the worst part, they'd done it here, in my home. I thought about all the hours I'd spent getting everything ready, scrubbing floors, polishing silverware, ironing tablecloths. The money spent on groceries, wine, extra chairs. For years, I had been the one to make sure Thanksgiving happened at all, because no one else was willing to host. And this was how they repaid me. I sat there in silence until I heard chairs scraping downstairs, signaling the end of dinner. More laughter, the clatter of dishes, and then, one by one, the front door opening and closing. They were leaving. No one came to check on me. No one knocked. When the house finally went quiet, I went downstairs. The dining room looked like a battlefield. Plates stacked haphazardly, crumbs everywhere, wine stains on the tablecloth. They hadn't even bothered to clean up properly. Something in me shifted right then. I started cleaning, not because I wanted to, but because I needed something to do with my hands. As I scrubbed, my mind started working in a way it hadn't before. The group chat. Mom and Carol's look. Claire's smirk. Piece by piece, it clicked. This wasn't just one night. This was a pattern. I had been bending over backward for years, hosting every major holiday, buying gifts, showing up for every event. And still, I was the butt of the joke. When I finished cleaning, I sat down at the table with a pen and paper. For the first time in my life, I made a list. Not a shopping list, not a cooking schedule. A list of everything I had done for this family over the past 5 years. Money spent, time off work, favors done. I filled nearly 2 pages. Staring at the numbers, I realized something. They had come to expect it. The reason they felt so comfortable mocking me, humiliating me in my own home, was because they thought I'd always forgive them. I'd always host next year. I'd always laugh it off. I'd always keep the peace. But sitting there, staring at that list, I knew something had to change. The next morning, my phone was full of messages. Mom, hope you've cooled off. Don't take last night so seriously. Claire, you disappeared. We were just trying to have fun. Carol, you need to learn to take a joke. I didn't respond. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went into the group chat and removed myself. Then, I blocked Claire's number. Then Carol's. For a few hours, I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear because I knew they'd notice. Relief because, for the first time, I wasn't just swallowing my anger. Later that day, my dad called. You can't just leave the family chat, he said, sounding annoyed. You're overreacting. Maybe I am, I said quietly. But I'm done being the family's punching bag. Don't be dramatic, he said. Thanksgiving is supposed to be about family. It was, I said, until last night. And I hung up. That evening, I went to the grocery store and bought myself a single-serve frozen dinner. I sat on the couch, ate it in silence, and watched a movie. It was the most peaceful night I'd had in years. But as I sat there, a new thought began forming, slow, quiet, but persistent. If they thought last night was memorable, what would they think when I stopped playing along entirely? And that was the first time I caught myself smiling since Thanksgiving. The morning after my quiet, frozen dinner evening, I woke up later than usual and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. A profound lightness. No frantic group messages buzzing, no reminders from my mom about next year's menu, no sarcastic jabs from Claire. For the first time in what felt like forever, my house was silent. And it was my silence, not the tense, awkward kind, but the kind that feels like a fresh sheet of snow. I poured myself coffee and sat at the table where my family had humiliated me just days before. The tablecloth was washed and folded, the dishes put away. If it weren't for the faint memory of that stupid paper crown lying in the trash, you'd never know anything had happened. And that's when it hit me. They had expected me to get over it already. By now, I was supposed to be texting apologies for overreacting or inviting them over for leftovers. They'd probably all laughed about it in their own group chats, patting themselves on the back for teaching me to lighten up. But no one had apologized. No one had even admitted that what they did was cruel. Instead, I was getting messages like, "So, are you hosting Christmas, too, or not?" I deleted the message without replying. In the days that followed, something in me started to shift. At first, it was subtle. I started saying no to things I'd usually agree to, like helping Claire's kids with their science projects or picking up groceries for my mom. I stopped being available on demand. I stopped making myself the default solution to every family inconvenience. And surprisingly, the world didn't end. In fact, my life got better. With the extra time, I started going to the gym again, something I'd neglected for years because I was always running around doing favors. At first, I was clumsy, sore, and out of breath. But after a few weeks, I started feeling stronger. I was sleeping better. My clothes fit differently. Work, too, started improving. I'd been quietly grinding away at my job for years, never making waves, never asking for recognition. But something about setting boundaries with my family gave me a new kind of confidence. I started speaking up more in meetings, pitching ideas instead of just nodding along. To my surprise, people listened. One day, my boss pulled me aside. "You've been doing excellent work lately," she said. "How would you feel about taking on a leadership role for the new project in January?" I tried to play it cool, but inside I was almost giddy. That night, I sat on the couch with a glass of wine and thought about how far I'd come in just a few weeks. For so long, my identity had been tied to my family role, the good son, the responsible one, the dependable host. And when they laughed at me, it had felt like an attack on who I was. But now I was starting to see that I was more than that. I had a life outside of them. I had friends, coworkers, ambitions. And slowly, the anger that had been sitting like a stone in my chest started to turn into something else. Not forgiveness, not yet, but clarity. Christmas came and went, and for the first time ever, I didn't host. In fact, I didn't even attend. I got a dozen texts asking where I was, followed by more accusing me of being dramatic, but I stayed firm. Instead, I spent Christmas with a couple of close friends, playing board games and eating takeout Chinese food. It was simple, quiet, and perfect. New Year's rolled around, and I went to a party with some coworkers. At midnight, as everyone counted down, I realized that for the first time in my adult life, I was entering a new year without feeling obligated to anyone but myself. That thought was liberating. In January, I accepted the leadership position at work. It meant more hours, but also a significant raise. With the extra money, I finally made a few upgrades I had been putting off. A new sofa, better cookware, and a fresh coat of paint in the dining room. That room had been tainted with memories of my family's laughter. But as I painted it a warm new color, it felt like reclaiming it. Then came the real turning point. One afternoon, grabbing coffee near the office, I ran into my cousin Lauren, one of the quieter conspirators from Thanksgiving night. She looked surprised and, after some awkward small talk, finally blurted, "You know, Claire says you're being ridiculous about the whole Thanksgiving thing." I stared at her for a moment, then smiled, not in anger, but in a way that seemed to throw her off. "Tell Claire I said thanks," I said simply and walked away. For the first time, I realized I didn't owe them an explanation. Over the next few weeks, I started hearing through the grapevine that my absence at family events was making things difficult. Mom had apparently had to host Easter planning meetings herself, and Claire was complaining, "Edward isn't pulling his weight." Hearing that actually made me laugh. Pulling my weight. For years, I had been carrying the weight of the entire family's holiday expectations. And the second I set it down, they acted like I had betrayed them. That's when the final piece clicked into place. This wasn't just about me taking a break. This was about me showing them that I was done playing the role they had cast me in. That if they wanted to keep treating me like a prop in their little family comedy routine, they were going to do it without me. I started planning quietly and methodically. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my coworkers. But I knew that when Thanksgiving rolled around this year, I wasn't just going to skip dinner. I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had lost when they decided to humiliate me. I started saving a little extra from every paycheck. I made calls to caterers and rental companies, not for this year, but for the future. I even began working on a few new recipes. Not the elaborate ones I used to make, but something new, something that would make next year's dinner unforgettable. Because if they thought last year's Thanksgiving was memorable, they hadn't seen anything yet. By the time summer rolled around, I was no longer the same person who had stood frozen in his own dining room while his family laughed at him. My mornings started early at the gym. My workdays were full but satisfying. And my evenings were spent doing things for myself, trying new recipes, reading books I'd put off for years, catching up on old hobbies. But even with all those improvements, a single thought kept circling in the back of my mind. Thanksgiving was coming. Every time I passed a grocery store display of turkeys or saw a new autumn recipe online, my stomach would tighten just a little. Not with dread anymore, but with anticipation. In late August, I got a call from my mom, the first one in months. "Edward," she said, her voice unusually polite. "So, we were wondering if you'd be willing to host Thanksgiving again this year." I actually laughed, not out loud, but that quiet kind of laugh you let slip when you can't believe what you're hearing. "I thought you all wanted a different kind of Thanksgiving," I said carefully. "Oh, honey, last year was just a silly thing," she said breezily, as though orchestrating a public humiliation in my own house was no bigger deal than a misplaced napkin. "You know how your sister gets. We were just teasing." I let her words hang there for a moment, then said, "I'll think about it." And for the next 2 months, that's exactly what I did. Think, plan, prepare. I knew one thing. If I did decide to host, it wouldn't be for them. It would be for me. Then came the break I didn't know I needed. At work, the project I had been leading all year ended up being a massive success. My boss called me into her office and told me that the company wanted to give me a year-end bonus. A big one. Enough to cover all my expenses for a few months if I wanted. I thanked her, kept my professional face on. But the second I got back to my desk, I started running numbers in my head. With the bonus, plus the money I had been quietly saving all year, I realized I had more than enough to pull off something dramatic. But I didn't just want dramatic. I wanted calculated. I wanted to make them feel what I had felt, blindsided, off balance, forced to sit with the uncomfortable truth about themselves. So, I got strategic. I started reaching out to vendors discreetly, quietly using my personal email. Caterers, decorators, even a few local event planners. I didn't tell them the full story, just that I wanted something unforgettable, something that would impress a family used to traditional dinners. At the same time, I kept my distance from my family. I wanted them to miss me. I wanted them to feel the gap I left behind when I stopped organizing everything. And apparently, it was working. One afternoon, my aunt accidentally called me while meaning to call someone else, and I overheard her say, "If Edward doesn't host again, I'm not doing it. I'm not cleaning up after everyone." That little comment told me everything. They had taken my efforts for granted for so long that now, without me, their holidays were falling apart. But the real turning point came in early November. I was leaving the office when I ran into Claire, of all people, waiting outside the building. She must have found out where I worked from my mom, because she looked way too pleased with herself. "Edward," she said, giving me a smile that was meant to be disarming. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow. "Look, last year got a little out of hand," she admitted, though her tone made it sound more like she was confessing to spilling a drink than humiliating me. "Mom really wants us all together this year. You know, she can't handle hosting. So, can we just forget it ever happened?" I studied her for a moment. "Forget it," I said. "Claire, you planned it." She shrugged. "We thought it would be funny." "And was it?" I asked. She didn't answer, just looked away. I let the silence stretch, then said, "I'll let you know if I'm hosting." The look on her face was priceless, a mix of hope and confusion. She wasn't expecting me to have that kind of control over the situation. That night, I sat at my desk with a notepad and went through every single detail I wanted to get right. Not just the food, everything. The seating arrangement, the timing, even the music. But more importantly, I planned for what would come after dinner. Because this time, there was going to be a moment, a big one, and I was going to be the one controlling it. As Thanksgiving drew closer, I sent out a single message to the group chat. Yes, I rejoined it just for this. "Thanksgiving dinner, my place. November 28th. That was it. No emojis, no enthusiasm, no extra details. The replies rolled in quickly, excited, relieved, full of smiley faces and exclamation marks. Finally, Claire wrote, "So glad we're back on track." Carol added, "Me too." But they didn't know what kind of track I had in mind. In the days leading up to Thanksgiving, I worked like I always did. But this time, I wasn't just cooking. I was orchestrating. I confirmed the caterer, finalized the menu, arranged the delivery schedule, and quietly hired someone to handle cleanup afterward. For the first time ever, I wasn't going to spend Thanksgiving running around the kitchen, sweating and exhausted. I was going to sit back, smile, and watch everything unfold. The night before Thanksgiving, I walked through the house and looked at the dining room. It looked perfect, better than perfect. But the real perfection wasn't in the food or the decor. It was in the knowledge that tomorrow, I wouldn't be the one standing in the corner of the kitchen, gripping the counter while everyone laughed at me. Tomorrow they were going to be the ones squirming. And as I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, I felt calm for the first time since last year. This Thanksgiving wasn't just going to be different. It was going to be unforgettable. Thanksgiving morning felt completely different this year. There was no frantic rush to peel potatoes or baste the turkey. No sticky notes cluttering the fridge. No last-minute panic about whether we had enough chairs. Everything had already been handled. I woke up at 8, showered, and had a quiet breakfast. Nothing fancy, just coffee and toast while watching the morning news. By 10 a.m., the caterers arrived. A small team that worked like a well-oiled machine, setting out food, arranging platters, making sure everything was perfect. For once, I wasn't sweating over a hot oven. I was free to walk around, check on things, and just breathe. By noon, the house looked like something out of a magazine. The table was immaculate. Gold chargers, polished glassware, fresh flowers in the center. The turkey, roasted to perfection by professionals, gleamed under the dining room lights. When the doorbell rang at 4, I was ready. The first guests trickled in, my parents, Carol, and Claire. I greeted them politely, but with just enough coolness to remind them I hadn't forgotten. Claire, clearly trying to play the peacemaker, said, "Wow, Edward, you really outdid yourself this year." "Thanks," I said simply, stepping aside so they could see the spread. Their eyes widened. I could see the surprise on their faces. They had expected me to put together another home-cooked dinner, but this was next level. This looked expensive, professional, deliberate. Slowly, the rest of the family arrived, each of them reacting with similar awe. Compliments started flying almost immediately. "This is beautiful, Edward. This must have taken forever. Where did you get those centerpieces?" I just smiled. "Glad you like it." Dinner began, and everything went exactly as I planned. The food was perfect. The drinks flowed freely, and conversation started to relax everyone into that familiar holiday rhythm. They were starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, this year would be different, that I had finally let go and moved on. That was exactly what I wanted them to think. Halfway through the meal, my mom dabbed at her lips with her napkin and said, "Edward, I'm just so glad we're all here together again. This is how Thanksgiving is supposed to be." "Yeah," Claire added, smiling. "Much better than last year's drama, right?" I let that hang in the air for a beat, then set down my glass. "I'm glad you brought that up," I said calmly. The table went quiet. I stood slowly, taking my time. "Last year," I began, my voice steady, "you all decided that humiliating me in my own home would be entertaining. You planned it ahead of time. You talked about it behind my back. You turned something that I loved, this day, this meal, into a stage where I was the punchline." "Edward," my mom began, but I held up a hand. "No," I said, still calm. "You had your turn last year. Now it's mine." I reached under the table and pulled out a folder I had placed there earlier. Inside were copies of the list I had made months ago. Every holiday I had hosted, every dollar I had spent, every time I had rearranged my life to accommodate them. I passed the copies around the table. "This," I said, "is what I have done for this family since I started hosting. Every single holiday, every single expense. I did it because I wanted to, because I thought it mattered. And this," I gestured to the room, to the food, to the perfect table, "is the last time I will ever do it for you." There was a stunned silence. "I wanted you to see," I continued, "what it looks like when someone puts in effort not out of obligation, but out of choice. When someone cares enough to do it right. And I wanted you to enjoy it, because after tonight, you are on your own." My dad frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied evenly, "that this is the last holiday I will ever host. I will not be the family's unpaid event planner anymore. I will not spend weeks cleaning, cooking, and coordinating so I can be laughed at. If you want Thanksgiving next year, you can host it yourselves." Claire blinked, clearly stunned. "You can't just—" "I can," I said, cutting her off. "And I am." I let that sink in for a moment, then delivered the final part of my plan. "Oh, and by the way," I added casually, "the caterers are packing up the leftovers and taking them with them when they leave. So if anyone wants seconds, I'd get them now." There was a small gasp from someone at the table. "Yes," I said. "That means there will be no containers full of turkey for you to take home this year. No free meals for the rest of the weekend. Tonight, You eat what's here, and when it's gone, it's gone. You could have heard a pin drop. And then, for good measure, I smiled. Not the forced, placating smile I had worn last year, but a genuine one, the kind that said I was completely in control. Now, I said, sitting back down, who wants pie? The rest of the meal was quiet. Eerily quiet. No one made jokes. No one laughed. For the first time in years, I was the one who held the room in silence, and it felt incredible. As dinner wrapped up, I stood and thanked everyone for coming. Then, as the caterers began clearing plates, I added, "You'll find the front door unlocked. Happy Thanksgiving." One by one, they got up, gathering their coats in silence, their faces pale and stunned. And as the last guest stepped out into the cold November night, I stood in the doorway watching them go, my house warm and glowing behind me. For the first time since this whole mess began, I didn't feel small. I felt powerful. That night, after the last taillight disappeared down my street, I closed the door, locked it, and let out a long, slow breath. The house was quiet again, but this time, the quiet felt earned. The caterers finished packing up the last of the trays and handed me the receipt. I thanked them and slipped them an extra tip, feeling almost giddy as I watched them load the food into their van and drive away. No leftovers, no mess for me to clean. No family lingering in the living room pretending to help while making little jabs. Just silence. Real, peaceful silence. I sat down at the head of the table, still set with the beautiful plates and half-burnt candles, and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time since I could remember, I didn't feel like I was bracing for impact. I didn't feel like the night had taken something out of me. This time, I felt like I had taken something back. The fallout began the next morning at 7:03 a.m. My phone buzzed with the first message. "Mom. Edward, we need to talk about last night." Then, "Claire. Seriously, taking the leftovers? That was petty. Carol, we all feel like you overreacted. You made everyone uncomfortable." I stared at the screen, sipping my coffee. Then, without replying, I set the phone down and went for a run. By the time I got back, there were 12 missed calls. 2 from my dad, 5 from Claire, even 1 from my aunt who never calls. I made breakfast, sat by the window, and ate slowly, ignoring the constant buzzing. Later that afternoon, my dad finally left a voicemail. "Son, what you did last night was out of line. You embarrassed your mother in front of the entire family. You need to apologize and fix this before Christmas." I listened to it twice, then deleted it. Christmas. That was the part that made me laugh out loud. They still thought there would be a Christmas. Over the next few days, the messages escalated. Claire accused me of ruining Thanksgiving for everyone. My mom sent a long, tearful text about how family is all we have and how I was tearing us apart. Carol sent me a passive-aggressive photo of her kids eating frozen pizza with the caption, "Glad you're teaching them valuable lessons about generosity." But here's the thing, none of it worked. For the first time ever, their guilt trips didn't land. I didn't feel like the bad guy because I wasn't. I knew what they were really upset about. Not that I had been petty, not that I had overreacted, but that I had taken away their favorite thing. The free labor, the guaranteed meal, the ability to laugh at me and still expect me to serve dessert. And without me, they had nothing to fall back on. Word started trickling in through relatives who were less involved that Christmas dinner had been a disaster. Claire had tried to host, but her kitchen wasn't big enough. The turkey had come out dry, and half the cousins ended up eating takeout by the end of the night. I didn't go. Instead, I spent Christmas in the mountains with a couple of friends, sitting by a fire, drinking hot cocoa, and watching the snowfall. When New Year's rolled around, I got a single text from my mom. "We miss you. Can we start over?" I sat with that message for a while. I could feel a part of me softening, remembering the years before all the tension, before the humiliation, before everything boiled over. But then I remembered standing in my kitchen last Thanksgiving, hands shaking, staring at the counter while everyone laughed in the other room. I remembered the sash, the crown, the chanting, and I knew my answer. I typed back, "You can start over without me." Then I blocked the group chat entirely and turned off my phone. That night, I sat on my couch, the house quiet except for the sound of the fireplace crackling, and I smiled. A small, calm smile. For years, I had given my family everything they asked for. And for once, I had given myself something back. I raised my glass in the empty room and said softly, "Happy New Year, Edward." And it was If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more crazy Reddit tales, and ring the bell so you never miss the next one. And hey, share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know what you would have done in this situation.